So I've titled the talk Truth in Our Times. Truth in Our Times, a talk on the essential nature of truth. And I, for one, personally like reading and understanding the history of various nations. And I find that no nation that was ever truly free was ever built on lies or deception. All the nations that were ever built on lies or deception, history teaches us, are nations that end up being dictatorships or totalitarian regimes where tyrants rule, just, hold on to power, and they oppress people. Now, as I already said, this is my second time in Uganda, and I know you have sort of a history with that sort of oppressive regime. But since my trip last year, I've actually admired quite a lot your Ugandan coat of arms. I really like the Ugandan coat of arms. It's a beautiful coat of arms. I've seen a lot of coat of arms. Of course, there are many coat of arms in England and many other Western nations. But I've tried to get the Ugandan coat of arms, the sticker for the Ugandan coat of arms from various what are those called, the souvenir stores and stuff, but they don't have it. They only like to have the Ugandan flag, and they don't have the Ugandan coat of arms for some reason. I'll try to find it before leaving on Uganda this time, and if you know somewhere I can get it, let me know. Okay, a sticker of the Ugandan coat of arms. But what I love the most about your coat of arms is the motto at the very bottom, what it says, "For God and my country." Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is sort of that's your national motto, is it? For God and my country. And assumed in that motto, very interestingly, is truth. If you think about it. Ugandans are to be true. When you say for God and my country, Ugandans are to be true to God and your country. I come from India, as Raymond mentioned, and the leaders of India way back in 1950 adopted the national motto of India. The Sanskrit phrase taken from the Hindu holy scriptures, the Vedas, the Sanskrit phrase Satyameva Jayate, which means truth alone triumphs. It was adopted as India's national motto on Republic Day 1950, and it proves that there was the realization on the part of India's national leaders that for the nation of India to be free, truth had to be the foundation even of the Indian nation. And the same realization dawned upon the framers of America's Declaration of Independence in 1776. The preamble to the Declaration of Independence is very interesting. I don't think I'll need that. That's okay. I'm fine without a mic, but thank you for the effort. In the declaration, the preamble to the Declaration of Independence says this: "We hold these truths," you may have heard this before, "to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Notice that the truth of creation by the Creator is assumed by the framers of the Declaration as the foundation of freedom. So not only is truth at the center of the freedom of nations, but as we're going to find out throughout the course of this talk, truth is at the center, at the foundation for all of life, for every individual human being, not just nations. So as we consider the idea of truth in this presentation, Truth in Our Times, I would like us to look at certain facets of truth and consider them under three different categories. Truth specifically, truth generally, and truth ultimately. Truth specifically, generally, and ultimately. But before we look at these three categories, I want to tell you about an interesting phenomenon that originated in India, but this phenomenon that I'm going to talk about has captivated the entire or most of at least the Western world. And we look at this phenomenon in the West because of the kind of influence that a nation like America has had historically on nations like yours and mine. This phenomenon has captivated the Western world and has helped redefine how they in the West look at the whole idea, the concept of truth. 11 years ago, in 2012, the Washington Post, which is a well-known newspaper in the States, the Washington Post wrote an article in which it asked this question. I quote, "Why is a faith founded under a Bodhi tree in India 2,500 years ago enjoying a newfound popularity in America today?" Again, why is a faith founded under a Bodhi tree in India 2,500 years ago enjoying a newfound popularity in America today? You have any idea what religion is being talked about here? It's Buddhism. Do you know why Buddhism is so popular in America and in other Western nations today? Let me share in a nutshell the story of its founder and answer why. Siddhartha Gautama, that's the name. Siddhartha Gautama was an ancient Indian prince, and he lived around the 6th and the 5th centuries BC in a place called Kapilavastu near Nepal. He lived a very sheltered life as a prince. He had no idea of what it meant to have suffering, hardship in life, and he was kept by his father, King Shuddhodana. He was kept by his father in the confines of a royal life. And one day when he ventured outside the confines of this royal life of his, he successively came upon 4 different kinds of people as he went outside the palace walls. First, he came across a decrepit old man, then a diseased man, then a dead man, and finally an ascetic or a sage. A decrepit old man, a diseased man, a dead man, and then finally he comes across a sage. So, having discovered the reality of suffering outside of his protected world, he then sets forth on a journey in search of truth. That's what he wanted to find. And this journey would last for years, and it would end in him becoming the Buddha, or the enlightened one. And when he became, quote unquote, enlightened, this is what he said, and I'm quoting him here. He said, "I am freed, and I comprehended. Ignorance was dispelled, knowledge arose, darkness was dispelled, light arose, even as I abided diligent, ardent, self-resolute." That's what he said. You know what's conspicuous here? What really stands out in what he said? The absence of God and the presence of self-effort. In some lines of poetry taken from the 1871 poem on the Buddha, a man named Richard Phillips expressed the Buddha's own views on truth. Richard Phillips wrote, and this is from his poem, "This will I do, for I have hope now. A way is opened. My heart says, go thou, and prosper, and do even as thou wilt. To thy work thou shalt incur no guilt, though teaching error and concealing truth, because thou dost it from love and ruth, and these flow not from a polluted fount. There is no God to call thee to account." Teaching error and concealing truth, and there is no God to call thee to account. Why is a religious philosophy like Buddhism popular and growing in a nation like America? Because not seeking the truth, consequently they end up not believing in God. Buddhism, therefore, is an atheistic religion, and it is a good representative of what many people in the world want today. A God without truth, love without truth, Justice without truth, success without truth, peace without truth, everything that's good in life without truth. God is the problem because He is truth, and truth is the problem because it leads one to the one true God. Let's look at three facets of truth, considered under three categories: truth specifically, truth generally, and truth ultimately. First of all, truth specifically. What is the state of truth today? In Isaiah 59, the Old Testament prophet from the Bible, Isaiah 59, he is lamenting the spiritual state of Israel, and he says this in Isaiah 59. Isaiah 59 verse 14. By the way, if you want a fuller explanation of this chapter of Old Testament scripture, as I said earlier, you can go to Hope and Truth's YouTube page, and you can find that sermon there on Hope and Truth's YouTube page. But he's lamenting in Isaiah 59 verse 14, and he says this: justice is turned back and righteousness stands afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. Truth is fallen in the street because if you read the rest of the text from the Bible, you will find that the heart and the home have been filled with trash. Truth in the streets, trash in the home and hearts. And we really find the same to be the case today. So then you have to ask the question, what is the trash that has entered many homes and many hearts? What is the trash that has entered the hearts and minds of many people in your country and abroad? We might actually collect all of the trash, and we might find that it fits into the trash bag of a system called postmodernism. Postmodernism has had a huge influence in causing truth to be in the street and trash to enter the home and the hearts. And of course, you may know, if you've studied history, that postmodernism actually originated in Europe and influenced much of Europe. However, we should know about postmodernism because we live in a media-saturated global village connected by media. And if Buddhism from India can have an influence on America, so can postmodernism from Europe have an influence on India and on Africa. So we need to know about postmodernism. What is postmodernism? It is basically a reaction to modernism. Postmodernism is a reaction to modernism. Modernism lasted from around 1789 to 1989. And in modernism, which is also called the period of enlightenment in Europe, in modernism, people based everything on a solely rational footing. Everything had to be rational, including the Christian faith. And everything that did not fit in with this rationalistic, so-called scientific thought that they wanted was rejected. Anything that didn't fit in was rejected, including much of the Bible. It was completely rejected, it was doubted. And so it was a grand social experiment, modernism was, which ultimately failed. People were so fed up with wanting to make everything rational in modernism that they went the polar opposite and they started making everything irrational in postmodernism. Makes sense actually if you think about it. And so I want to leave you with very briefly, four hallmarks or characteristics of postmodern thought among many that I could mention. And as we go through these characteristics, think of where and from who you may have heard these in your own life. These four characteristics of postmodernism. First of all, no absolutes. Postmodernists say that there are no such things as absolutes. There is no such thing as absolute truth. Instead, obviously, they say truth is relative. It is what you make it out to be, whatever you want it to mean. No absolutes for them, except the statement that says there's no absolutes. When they say there are no absolutes, they're making an absolute statement. And therefore, it is a self-defeating statement and philosophy. First of all, no absolutes. Secondly, no foundations or frameworks in life. Postmodernists say that we need no foundations for life. Nothing is needed. That means everything from the past, the foundation of the past, the foundation of history that our lives are built upon should be done away with. We should forget, we should erase, and to use a phrase that's been bandied about more recently, we should cancel. You know about cancel culture. We should cancel everything and we should begin anew. But what happens though? You look at history, you look at society, you look at civilizations that have completely taken out the past, especially of the foundation of Christ and His Word. What happens to those societies? What happens to those civilizations? And also very interestingly, when they say no foundations, we don't want the foundations of the past, it is also a self-defeating thing, because inasmuch as they say we should reject the idea of foundations from the past, one day their idea to reject foundations from the past will also be in the past. It's not always going to be present. And it's also very ironic that these kind of philosophers actually, who say that we should have no foundations, they write their books and they write their ideas sitting in buildings that actually have literal physical foundations. So again, it's a self-defeating philosophy. No absolutes, no foundations or frameworks. And then thirdly, language is just a prison house of words. Language is just a prison house of words. Postmodernists don't like words at all. Instead, they love images and they seek to bewitch us, beguile us with images. And the Bible says what? In the beginning was the image? No, it says in the beginning was the word, not the image. But we live in societies in which the lack of logic and language and our saturation with visual stimulation mean you can make words whatever you want them to mean. And Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, said, not that I believe in or agree with his doctrine, but he said something very interesting. When words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty. When words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty. And so in America, you find today that people are so confused, not everybody, but many are so confused as to what a woman is. So confused are they that Matt Walsh had to make a documentary called What is a Woman? The meaning of man and woman has lost its meaning. It's as a word, but also as a reality, not only as a word, but as a reality for many people today. But when postmodernists say that language is just a prison house of words, when they say that, again they defeat themselves, because they're actually using words to say that language is just a prison house of words. So it's self-defeating. And then we come to this fourth characteristic of postmodernism: life is ultimately meaningless. So you have no absolutes, no foundations, no language and logic, then obviously life becomes meaningless. And if that's the case, if life is meaningless truly, if you make the statement that life is meaningless, that statement itself is meaningless if life is ultimately meaningless. And so when one views life as ultimately meaningless, what happens? Morals and ethics go out the window, and a way of living called hedonism takes over. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And that is the state of truth specifically today. We counter it by knowing the essential nature of truth. So now we move secondly to truth generally. What is the nature of truth at all times? And in this I want you to consider with me 7 properties of the concept of truth, which help us better understand truth and to live it out. 7 properties. First of all, truth is universal. Truth is universal. It is absolute for all people. It is applicable to all people, all across time and across all geography. 2 plus 2 has always been and always will be equal to 4 wherever, whenever, and for whoever. It will be the same on Earth and on Mars. If you were to ever travel there, 2 plus 2 will always be equal to 4. The same 4000 BC, 6,000 years ago, the same in 2023. The same in Kampala, Uganda, the same in Kanyakumari, India. 2 plus 2 is always going to be equal to 4. Therefore, truth is universal. Secondly, truth is unchanging. Truth is unchanging. Physical components like time, space, and matter and force do not and cannot change truth. Truth remains unchanged forever. And in this sense, we say that truth is transcendent, in that truth transcends the physical parameters of time, space, and matter, which are constantly changing, but truth itself remains unchanged. It's universal, it's unchanging, and thirdly, truth is exclusive. Truth by very nature excludes anything and everything that is false. That's just the essential nature of truth. Now, it's been said that Christianity is a very exclusive and exclusivistic religion. And indeed it is. Christianity is an exclusive religion, but so are all other worldviews. But the great paradox of Christianity is what I want you to notice. The great paradox of Christian exclusivity is this. It is an exclusivity that seeks to include. That's the great paradox of Christian exclusivity. An exclusivity that seeks to include. Woven into the very fabric of the Christian faith is an effort to invite people to Jesus so he might include them among those who are his followers. An exclusivity that seeks to include. And then, fourthly, truth is knowable. Truth is knowable. Truth is something that can be known. It is something that can be perceived by people, known by people. In its very nature, truth is not something that exists to be hidden, but it exists to be known. I want to leave us with 3 tests for truth that can be applied to the person and the work of Jesus. 3 tests for truth. First of all, the test of time. The person of Christ has stood the test of time. Before he lived on the earth, there were hundreds of prophecies in the Old Testament that accurately predicted his coming. Then he lived his life on earth in pinpoint accuracy of those prophecies. He rose from the dead and then he ascended to heaven. The institution he started and promised to build, the church, continues 2,000 years after he lived on earth. This tells us that all that he said about the future will also come true. So that with regard to time, past, present, and future, Jesus passes the test. Why? He is above time. He's eternal. He is the Lord of history. In fact, as many authors have said, history is his story. And today you and I can entrust the writing of our life story to his hands by believing on him. The test of time, then the test of tangible experience. All the claims of Jesus and his person and work are not just spiritual, mystical, feel-good experiences. His influence and his power extend into your very life, changing your life, your heart, mind, when you have believed on him and received the forgiveness of sins that he offers. He alters your everyday, my everyday experience of human life by giving you the newness of life that you may be searching for today. He's the one who gives it to you. For those who truly believe in him and trust in him, Jesus also promises to answer prayer. And answered prayer, did you know, is the Achilles heel of the atheist when it comes to disproving Christianity. They say there's the atheist, that there's no God. We as Christians say there is a God. I make my prayer to God and I prove his existence. when He answers my prayer. Lastly, the test of logical scrutiny. The test of time, of tangible experience, and lastly, the test of logical scrutiny. All the truth claims of the Bible, whether about creation or salvation or about the person and work of Jesus, can be held up to the scrutiny of logic, which is what logic helps us make sense of the universe in which we live in, the world in which we live in. The Christian worldview, if you study it carefully, will be found to be the one which makes the most logical sense in life, one that can be tested logically as it relates to our life in this world and in the world to come. And you may have heard of C.S. Lewis's famous trilemma. He says, because of all the claims that Jesus made, Lewis says, Jesus is either a liar or a lunatic, or He is Lord. If He didn't rise from the dead as He promised, Jesus would be proven to be a liar. But because He did, because Jesus rose from the dead, logically it follows, and He proves to be the very embodiment and the essence of truth. And He offers you life today in all of its fullness. And so I invite you today, if you've never believed in Christ, you've never believed in Jesus Christ, know His truth and find the freedom that this God-man offers you. For Jesus said, speaking of Himself, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Thank you for your patience in listening.